Members of Congress, Excellencies, distinguished guests, friends, my name is Franz Afraim Katzir, Director of Sephardic Heritage International in DC, or SHIN-DC. Thank you for joining us for today's 4th annual Congressional Holocaust Commemoration. This program serves to memorialize the 6 million Jews killed by the Nazis and their collaborators, honor survivors, recognize those who risked their lives to rescue Jews, and educate about all of our experiences, including Sephardic and Romaniot ones. I would like to begin by thanking our partners for today's event, the embassies of Israel and Greece in Washington. I would also like to thank Ms. Anka Yael Popper from the Embassy of Germany for joining us today, as well as Mr. Armand Chandro from the Embassy of Albania. Thanks to our co-sponsors, Hillel International, J Times J Washington Jewish Film and Music Festivals, the Generations After, Temple Moses Sephardic Congregation of Florida, Sephardic Congregation Or Shalom, Bendichas Manos, Bendigamos Amsterdam, Seattle Sephardic Network, Our Sephardic Family, Izun Books, the Atlanta Jews of Color Council, AJOCC, the Rumi Forum, American Muslim and Multi-Faith Women's Empowerment Council, the Hellenic American Women's Council, Crossroad of Civilizations Museum, and the ADL. And thanks to Lev Ratnovsky for all his support. I would also like to take a moment to send some love out to Rachel Villeli Glazer, the daughter of Holocaust survivors from Greece. We're sending some love out to her and to her family. We will now begin by receiving testimony from our beloved David Baruch, a Holocaust survivor from Greece. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Afraim. Today is International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Today, I will present to you an eyewitness account on memorable events that took place in my birth town of Patras during the German concentration occupation. This presentation has been divided in 2 sections, memories and heroes. Memories from German occupation. My name is David Baruch. I was born in Patras, Greece. I am Jewish, Romaniotis, and Holocaust survivor. My birth town had a small Jewish community of 347 men, women, and children. We had a synagogue with a full-time rabbi. I attended public school with the Christian Orthodox boys and girls. I had many friends from the neighborhood and the school. We enjoy life as one family, although we understand the difference of our religions. As friends, we visited each other's home on a frequent basis, including during the the holidays of his religion. My Christian friends always came and visited our home. They were welcomed by my family and tasted a variety of sweets prepared by grandmother during the Jewish holidays. I also was welcomed to their homes during their Christian holidays. It was an exchange of friendship. It was a wonderful and enjoyable life, free and safe, living in Patras prior to the Holocaust. Unforgettable events. The German army occupied Greece from April 41 to October 44. I remember the first day the German army arrived in Patras. The German general organized a large military parade with heavy artillery and hundreds of soldiers that lasted several hours. The Germans parked 8 to 10 large tanks in the main square of Patras for several months. The guns of each large tank pointed to the streets where the pedestrians walked to their business. The German soldiers were sitting on top of each large tank, and they appeared ready to shoot at any pedestrian. Several weeks later, the German soldiers stood in the corner of a major square and selected 10 to 12 ordinary citizens passing by at that instant. Later in that day, these individuals were murdered by the German soldiers and they were hung in a square near our home. Each murdered individual was hung under one tree in order to be seen by pedestrians for several days. The German soldiers were guarding the entire area with machine guns. Key local, state, and religious leaders contacted the general, requesting him to deliver the bodies to the appropriate families for burial, thus allowing the families to perform the last religious rite for their loved ones. The general agreed and released the bodies several days later. Heroes from the German occupation. Many Jewish persons in Greece knew that Hitler's objective were the extermination of all Jews from occupied countries. The Jews of Patras were getting the news from word of mouth, and we were ready to move out of the city at a moment's notice. We were monitoring what was happening in Thessaloniki. The board of directors of the Jewish community of Patras, including my father and my uncle, had close relationship with several key local, state, and religious leaders. This relationship was the beginning of a true friendship that resulted in saving many Jewish families. The individuals that saved my family are Dimitrios was the local police commissioner. I would like to call him the savior for the Baruch family because he issued fake IDs for each member of our family at my father's request. By issuing the fake IDs, he really risked not only his life, but the entire family life. Each fake ID changed the Jewish name to a Christian one and the Jewish religion to a Christian Orthodox. Those fake ID saved our lives because the German soldiers had the right to stop us and request the personal ID. This individual was truly the savior for many Jewish families in Patras. I truly recognize the heroic actions taken by him during the occupation of Patras by the Germans. Polymeri family. My Aunt Betty had a Christian Orthodox girlfriend, and the two families had established a close relationship. This righteous family provided lodging for the Baruch family one evening in the basement of their house. If found by the Germans, the result would have been catastrophic, as they would have killed every member from both families. I believe the Polymeri family became champions due to their actions and the Baruch family escaped the transportation to the concentration camp of Auschwitz and Birkenau. Christian Orthodox priest and the village president. My father and uncle had identified the hiding location with the assistance of a close and trustworthy business associate. Every member of my family had been informed and prepared for our departure to the hiding location if necessary. This hiding location was in the mountains near the village of Brati, which was located about 40 to 50 kilometers southeast of Patras. The house consisted of 4 walls, a small window, and a door without electricity and water. It was an empty house, and it could not be seen by any person because it was surrounded by tall and thick branches and trees. 2 individuals knew the location of the house, and they had agreed that the Jewish family would be living in that house. Those 2 individuals were the local Orthodox priest, Elias Drosopoulos, and the president of the village. These individuals were the only 2 persons that coordinated the purchase and delivery of our food on an infrequent basis. They did not want other people from the village to know that there was a Jewish family hiding outside the village. The German soldiers visited the village of Brachny 2 to 3 times weekly. There were many scary moments due to the unexpected visit by the German army. The German soldiers were passing 200 to 300 yards away from the hiding location, and it was very important not to be seen by them. These 2 individuals were our protectors because they risked their life to save a Jewish family for 13 months. March 25, 1944 was Greek Independence Day. We were informed by the Christian Orthodox priest and the president of the village that on this day, the German transported the Jews from Patras, Ioannina, Yanna, Preveza, and other cities to the concentration camps. My family feared that the 2 sisters and their husbands from Patras and Ioannina were among those transported to the concentration camps. Liberation Day. We spent 13 months in hiding from September 43 to October 44. One day, those 2 individuals arrived in our hiding location extremely happy, announcing to us that Greece has been liberated and we are free to return to our home in Patras. October 24, 44 was the day we returned back to our home in Patras. My family escaped the transportation to the concentration camps due to the heroic individuals that put themselves and their families in danger for our sake. My family lost 2 uncles and an aunt to the concentration camps. Their names are Jacob and Hannah Zedek from Patras and Jacob Gabay from Ioannina. The Jewish community of Patras lost 99 members to the concentration camp of Auschwitz and Birkenau. Never, never again. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for sharing your moving story. We will now receive remarks from our congressional sponsor for this annual program, Representative Jamie Raskin.
Hey everyone, it's Congressman Jamie Raskin from Maryland's beautiful 8th Congressional District. I'm calling out to my friends at Sephardic Heritage International, DC, at the annual Congressional Holocaust Commemoration. Thank you for assembling us virtually. I look forward to us being back in person next year and coming years when we get through the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you nonetheless for focusing on our observance of the Holocaust. You know, when the January 6th violent attack on Congress took place, It was obviously a day of a lot of horror and a lot of terror. It didn't surprise me that there were domestic violent extremist groups that were involved and were found to be key organizers. There were people wearing T-shirts that said Camp Auschwitz staff on them. But the Oath Keepers were there, the 3%ers, the Aryan Nations, the militia groups, the QAnon networks spreading conspiracy theories and propaganda. We know how anti-Semitism and racism thrive in an environment like that. And we also know that anti-Semitism and racism are the gateway to destruction of liberal democracy and constitutional government. So I want to thank you for focusing on the Holocaust so we never forget the ultimate destination of that kind of hatred and dehumanization and demonization of people. And we want to continue to help those Holocaust survivors who are still with us to live their remaining years in dignity and without compounded trauma of seeing all of the nightmares of the last century come to repeat themselves. So I thank you for the importance of your work elevating Sephardic Jewish voices and culture. And thank you for your cultural diplomacy, bringing diplomats together with members of Congress and diverse communities. And thank you for everything you're doing to defend humanity and civilization at this very shaky time in the history of the people of the earth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman Raskin. We now also have the honor of receiving remarks from the first African-American chairperson of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Congressman Gregory Meeks. Over to you.
Good afternoon. I'm Congressman Gregory Meeks, and I'm the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and I'm honored to speak to you today on this solemn occasion. But first, let me thank Franz, Afraim, Katzir for the kind invitation, and thank you all for the important work you do to raise awareness of Sephardic heritage. As we mark the 77th anniversary of liberation of Nazi concentration camps and the end of the Holocaust, we raise awareness of the crimes against humanity perpetuated by the Nazi regime. We mourn the millions of lives who fell victim to its inhumanity, and to the fathers and the mothers, the daughters and the sons who were subjected to unparalleled cruelty. We honor those who survived through their persecution, including this year's special guest, who we are thankful to have among us today. And as a part of this year's theme, we honor those brave and righteous heroes around the world who fought to protect Jews from the Holocaust. Their bravery reminds us of our own duty to never allow atrocities of our past to fade from the memory of future generations. We do this to instill that duty in our children and our children's children, so we collectively never forget the capacity for humanity to commit terrible evil, or the capacity for mankind to stand up and fight down that evil. As I said last year, I am pained to see that anti-Semitism continues to rear its ugly head, and it does so globally. We see this in attacks on synagogues, violence against Jewish people, hateful rhetoric, and sadly, too many more examples of malicious anti-Semitism. And as chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, I continue to pledge to do everything in my capacity to shine a light on these incidents and to exercise the full authority of the committee to act. And I will continue to work to maintain the United States as a beacon of justice, inclusion, and refuge. So I'm very thankful for the opportunity to speak with you all on this solemn day. And I'm proud to join you in paying tribute to those we've lost, those who survived, and those whose bravery has and continues to support people from the scourge of hate. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Meeks. Additionally, we are honored to have the first Hispanic chairperson of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee participate in our Congressional Holocaust Commemoration. Connecting to our Iberian roots, Sephardic means Hispanic in Hebrew. And Senator Bob Menendez is a great source of pride to us and to the diverse Latino Jewish community. Over to you, Chairman Bob Menendez.
Hello, this is Senator Bob Menendez, New Jersey's senior senator and chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. As the highest ranking Latino in the United States Congress, it's an honor to join Sephardic Heritage International for the 2022 Congressional Holocaust Commemoration. I want to thank you for your commitment to raising awareness about the unique history of Sephardic Jews, the tragedies they endured during the Holocaust, and the heroes who aided in their escape and survival. For hundreds of years, vibrant communities of Sephardic Jews flourished throughout Europe and the Mediterranean. Yet after the rise of Hitler, they too were targeted by Nazi Germany's efforts to systematically eradicate all Jewish people. And they too were among the 6 million Jewish lives extinguished during the Holocaust. At a time when anti-Semitism is on the rise, both at home and around the world, we must remain ever vigilant to acts of intolerance and injustice that can escalate to hatred and eventually turn into violence. We must pledge to speak out against anti-Semitism, hatred, and bigotry in all of its forms. And we must honor the memories of the 6 million Jews lost by educating future generations about the horrors unleashed when hatred goes unchecked. That is how we turn our solemn promise to never forget into a vow, never again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Menendez. The theme of this year's Congressional Holocaust Commemoration is Heroes and Memory. David Baruch told us about how his family's relationship with Christian neighbors and community members was life-saving. 362 Greeks have been honored with the Righteous Among the Nations title to date by Yad Vashem. Her Excellency, Alexandra Papadopoulou, Ambassador of Greece to the United States, will now share some remarks with us.
It is an honor for the Embassy of Greece in the United States to partner again this year with the Embassy of Israel and the Sephardic Heritage International for the annual Congressional Commemoration of International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Today, as we honor the 77th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, we stand in awe at the horrors human beings can inflict on one another. Mr. Baruch, your tale of suffering was indeed poignant and pertinent, and thank you for sharing it with us. Tragically, though, we see and experience that anti-Semitism, hatred, bigotry, and racism still persist and are horribly gaining ground. Consequently, such commemorations are essential for countering them, especially in light of the recent disturbing rise of anti-Semitism in the form of violent and other attacks. American Jewish organizations, as well as other non-Jewish institutions, are expressing their concern about this increase, especially noticeable over the past 5 years in the US, but also around the world. Now more than ever, we need to be vigilant and diligent. We must never consider hatred against any group of people as normal, trivial, or acceptable. And we must take steps to counter the myths and stereotypes that lead to hatred and misunderstandings. Fundamental to fighting this trend is to preserve history for future generations. Keeping the memories of the Holocaust alive is our best protection against history repeating itself. And only we, today, can do that. As the Prime Minister of Greece, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, said, when Greece took over the presidency of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance in March 2021, to educate on events past is the responsibility of the present. He highlighted the importance of education and awareness, noting that teaching the Holocaust in schools is not enough. The story of the Holocaust must be told in a variety of ways that resonate with people. Greece is taking anti-Semitism very seriously and is taking steps to counter it. It is not only teaching the Holocaust in schools. It has adopted the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial, as well as the working definition of Holocaust denial and distortion. We're also building a museum that will tell the story of the Holocaust in innovative ways. Scheduled to open in 2015, the National Holocaust Museum of Greece will share the story of the Holocaust and the Greek Jewish community and preserve it for future generations. I'm also happy to report that after many years of efforts and negotiations, we have secured the return from Russia of the archives of the Greek Jewish communities, which were stolen by the Nazis in 1942 and taken to Moscow when the Soviet army captured Berlin. These archives tell the story of the Jews of Greece and includes documents, books, and veneration objects from around 30 synagogues. All these will bear testament to the destruction and tragedy of the Holocaust and help raise awareness about the richness of Jewish life in Greece. And today, in honor of the thousands of our Jewish compatriots who perished during the Nazi occupation of Greece, as well as honoring the memory of all victims of the Holocaust, the lights of the City Hall of Athens will be lit so as to remember and vow that this will never happen again. Before I close, please allow me to introduce Mr. Dimitris Kiakidis, who is joining us from Greece. This past September, Mr. Kiakidis received the Yad Vashem medal and title Righteous Among the Nations from the Ambassador of Israel to Greece. Mr. Kiakidis received this on behalf of his grandparents, Vasiliki and Dimitrios Kiakidis, who rescued Donna, Rodrig, a Greek Jew from the town of Komotini, and the only member of her family to survive. Mr. Kiakidis, thank you for joining us. It is worth noting that 362 Greeks have been honored with the Righteous Among the Nations title today. They include the late Archbishop of Athens and all Greece, Damaskinos, the chief of the Greek police during German occupation, Angelos Everett, Greek resistance fighter Lela Karayani, the former mayor of Zakynthos, Lukas Karer, the then Metropolitan Chrysostomos of Zakynthos, the aunt of the current Greek Prime Minister, Evangelia Georgiadou, and many more true heroes. Thank you to all of them. Thank you for inviting me to join you today.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I would like to thank Mr. Dimitris Kiakidis for joining us from Greece. We're thankful from the bottom of our hearts and really appreciate what your grandparents did.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the descendants of Vasiliki and Dimitris Kiakidis and their families, I would like to thank the Sephardic Heritage International for the annual Congressional commemoration, the invitation to the event, Your Excellency and the US, the Greek embassy in the US, congressmen attending, and all of you friends for the honor that you have done to our family, inviting us here. We were very proud to receive the honor on behalf of our parents, of our grandparents, by the Yad Vashem Foundation and the State of Israel. And we feel very touched about this honor and the recognition that our grandparents got. We want to wish that, we want to tell you that we will always remember, and we wish that nothing like that will ever happen again, never again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dimitris. This program, as you know, features the descendants of the righteous among the nations, like Mr. Dimitris Kiakidis. We're also honoring Aristides de Sousa Mendes of Portugal and Chiune Sugihara of Japan. We will now receive remarks from His Excellency Domingos Fezas Vital, Ambassador of Portugal to the United States.
Thank you very much, Franz. Dear friends, I hope that you and your loved ones are all well and safe. And I understand that time is of the essence, so I will be brief. First, thank you for inviting me. During these 6 years as Ambassador of Portugal to the United States, it has been an unremitting honor, privilege, and pleasure to address you. Second, I have been asked to focus on Aristides de Sousa Mendes, first diplomat to be recognized as virtuous among the nations. The last year, his figure has been honored in significant ways, both in the US and in Portugal. Starting with the US, both chambers of Congress have passed resolutions saluting his brave and principled stand, as well as his humanitarian attitude that enabled tens of thousands of French Jews and others to escape the horrors of the Holocaust. So thank you to Senators Mitt Romney and Chris Murphy for sponsoring Senate Resolution 186, approved on April 28, 2021. Thank you too to my good friend Martin Gold, who was tireless in his support for this cause. The House passed its own version, House Resolution 817, on November 18, 2021, thus responding to a very timely initiative by Representative Jim Costa, co-sponsored by Representatives Bill Keating, Jim McGovern, David Cicilline, David Valadão, Lori Trahan, Juan Vargas, Jake Hutchinson, and Scott Peters. A grand thank you to all of them. In Portugal, following an unanimous decision by our parliament, Aristides de Sousa Mendes received the highest possible honor as he was memorialized in the National Pantheon on October 19, 2021, a moving tribute by the whole country united in its gratitude. Part of what makes Aristides de Sousa Mendes a hero is the fact that his actions came at an immense professional and personal cost. His rehabilitation and promotion to ambassador came posthumously. As I see it, the question heroes like Aristides de Sousa Mendes confront each and every one of us with is the following. In a similar situation, will I have the courage to be like him, or will I choose the comfort of being just me? To commemorate and to celebrate the memory of those who did not hesitate in their answer, no matter the price they paid, as Aristides de Sousa Mendes in particular, when anti-Semitism in various forms is resurfacing in troubling ways, not only in Europe, as my Greek colleague just told us, is also an opportunity to assert our own determination to never forget and to never let their example be forgotten. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, from Canada's Parliament, we have a family member of Aristides de Sousa Mendes, MP Alexandra Mendes, who unfortunately has taken ill, so I will read a short message from her. That message will be followed by remarks from Louis-Philippe Mendes, the grandson of Aristides de Sousa Mendes. And we send our best wishes to MP Alexandra Mendes for the swiftest recovery. Here is her message. Your Excellencies, fellow parliamentarians, honored guests, I was very touched to be invited to this event by Mr. Katzir. Holocaust Remembrance Day is always a somber, if an inescapable date in my calendar. It is more personal this year. For me, Aristides de Sousa Mendes is the embodiment of moral rectitude and fundamental goodness. In many ways, he has been a haunting reminder to my branch of the family that these attributes have little, if anything, to do with politics. Today, we don't have time to go over the complicated history that meant I only became aware of Aristides de Sousa Mendes' existence when my paternal grandfather decided to end decades of family estrangement in the 70s. Since then, I've learned everything that I could about Aristides de Sousa Mendes, and in 2008, had the immense good fortune to finally meet and become friends with one of his Canadian grandsons, Louis-Philippe Mendes. Aristides de Sousa Mendes is an icon in our family The choices he made in that summer of 1940, what he risked, and what he committed to are indeed a source of continued inspiration in the life I've chosen to live. Before entering politics, through my years as a Girl Guide, a very involved student, and eventually a passionate advocate for immigrants and refugees, I've tried to make mine his very poignant statement. I would rather stand with God and against man than with man and against God. We know that Aristides de Sousa Mendes was not a perfect person, none of us is, but the compassion and humanity that inspired him in June 1940 were profoundly transformative for thousands of families. And for me, that is a life well lived. Again, thank you for the opportunity to share this moment with you, and may we all continue to pursue the commitment so that never again is indeed enforced. Alexandra Mendes, Member of Parliament, House of Commons, Canada. Now over to you, Louis-Philippe Mendes.
It's an honor for me to be here with all of you and to represent the Sousa Mendes family. The word that I'd like to bring up today is imperfection. What I think is so interesting about what makes the story of my grandfather, Aristides Sousa Mendes, so powerful is the fact that him and Angelina, his wife, were imperfect, like all of us, but so we could everyone could relate to them in their story, in they weren't they weren't saints, they weren't superheroes, they weren't able of miracles. When the stress built up and they reached its peak, they were able to stand up strong with courage and make a great difference. And in today's world, humanity is submitted to so much, to such a rise of stress related to the populism, climate change, pandemic, all of those. And each one of us, in our imperfection, we have opportunities of making the difference. And my thoughts, before sharing words with publicly, like today, I always wonder what my grandfather, my grandparents would say. And I think they would say that beyond giving admiration to what they've done, we should receive influence from their story. And in everyone's life, we could make a difference. We could act with more courage. So those were my words. All the best.
Thank you so much, Louis-Philippe. Masashi Mizoguchi, Head of Public Affairs and Spokesperson for the Embassy of Japan in Washington, will now share remarks with us.
Good afternoon. I'm Masashi Mizoguchi, spokesperson for the Embassy of Japan. I first want to thank SHIN-DC, Director Franz Afraim, Katzir, for inviting me to join this important event. It's a privilege to share with diplomats from around the world to remember the tragedy of the Holocaust and to honor the stories of survivors. These stories inspire us all to continue to work to build a just and peaceful world that never lets such horrors come to pass ever again. It's also very special for me to be sharing a virtual stage with Nobuki Sugihara, the son of Chiune Sugihara. As a Japanese diplomat in Lithuania, when World War II began, Chiune Sugihara had the opportunity to put his belief in human kindness into practice when he signed thousands of life-saving visas that allowed Jewish refugees to escape through Japan. Sugihara's efforts were joined by other others who were critical to their escape. This included Japanese and European diplomats, as well as ordinary Japanese citizens in Tsuruga City and Kobe City who helped the refugees as they passed through Japan. Their efforts showed that Sugihara's visas were not really the effort of a single diplomat, but an entire chain of people around the world who stepped forward to help. That's something that I'm reflecting on today. When Chiune Sugihara was honored by Israel in 1984 with the title Righteous Among the Nations, it was a proud moment for Japan. But this proud moment didn't become an ending for the Sugihara story. And I'm happy to say that my government took this story as a starting point. In 2018, when I was the Deputy Consul General of Japan in New York, I invited members of the New York City Council on a trip to Japan, which included a visit to Tsuruga City, where the refugees had first landed in 1940 to 1941. There, one city council member was surprised to learn that his grandfather's name was on a local memorial museum to honor Sugihara visa refugees. I will never forget holding the hands of people who were only alive because their ancestors were able to grasp the thinnest rope of hope during one of humanity's darkest moments. In 2019, Mr. Fuchigami, the mayor of Tsuruga City, visited New York City. I was still there, so we invited the mayor and Sugihara survivors and their family members to a heartwarming event we held at the Japanese Consul General's residence. This is an example of how these ties can continue to grow. I also remember another 2019 moment in Philadelphia, which brought Nobuki Sugihara together with Rabbi Goldman, who himself was the son of refugee who survived thanks to Sugihara visa. It's so important that we can come together to mark the horror of the Holocaust and to honor its millions of victims by doing what's necessary to ensure that such a tragedy never happens again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Masashi Mizobuchi, for your remarks. We will now hear from Mr. Nobuki Sugihara, son of Japanese diplomat Chiune Sugihara, who helped many Jews flee Europe.
Hello, friends. I can tell you about my father. My father was born in 1900, 1st of January. It's easy to remember and calculate his age. I jumped to 1968. My father was working in Moscow as a representative of Japanese trading company. And we received a phone call from Embassy of Israel in Tokyo that there is somebody who wanted to meet my father. He came for 2 weeks every year for meeting in Japan. So my father took me to the embassy, and there was a commercial attaché in the embassy from Israel. And he showed us a piece of paper with a stamp issued by Japanese consulate in Kaunas in Lithuania. And he said he was one of the refugees who received transit visa from my father. I didn't know the story. My father or mother never told us children that there was such a story in Kaunas. He didn't speak, he didn't want to speak, or I don't know. Then the commercial attaché, Mr. Nishri, explained that they had to escape from Poland because Nazi Germany was coming in to city of Lodz and other cities, and they escaped to Lithuania, neighbor country of Poland. But in Lithuania, there was no more embassy or consulate except Japanese consulate open. And they had to go out from Lithuania because Soviet was occupying Kaunas. And in any moment, Nazis was coming into Kaunas. So they looked for escape. And there was the only way is to go out, to exit from Lithuania to Soviet Union. And Soviet Union, you take a railroad to Japan Sea, to port of Soviet Union, Vladivostok, and take a ship to Japan. And from Japan to go anywhere they could, USA, Australia, or Palestine. Everybody had some friends and families. So meantime, they wanted to escape, go out from Lithuania to Soviet. But as my father, consul, he had to ask the embassy, not the embassy, sorry, Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Japan if he may issue transit visa. But answer was no. He asked 2 times, 3 times. Actually, it was 1940, starting from July till the end of August. First in July, 10 people came and asked. Until the end of July, maybe there was a few hundred. So he received 3 times no, not to issue. Of course, the ministry didn't say not to issue. Ministry put conditions. If they can fulfill the conditions, you can issue transit visa. But nobody could, because they had to show a lot of money for the journey. For the moment, it's like $5,000 or $10,000. Not everybody had such a money. So my father decided to issue by himself. He knew that he will be punished, but he issued about 2,300 visa during 1 month of August. And many people could go to Siberia. Some went through first to Moscow and then down to Turkey and Palestine, but very limited people. And we know that some people, some family member couldn't go all together. Maybe eldest son, eldest daughter, they couldn't afford to pay the ticket and the journey. So it was a very sad story. And on the other hand, it was a happy story if they could go through. All this I heard much later because I was invited to study in Hebrew University in Jerusalem from the ambassador, Israeli ambassador. In that day, my father was invited to the embassy in Tokyo. And I got invitation and I moved to Israel. I studied. And my father came a year later to visit me. And he met 3 survivors. One was Dr. Baruch. He was that time Minister of Religions in Israeli government. And he was also the leader of the refugees in Kaunas. He came from Warsaw. And another gentleman was vice mayor of Tel Aviv. And the third person was minister in the government too. And they told us a bit of story, how they escaped. And that time, I still didn't know much. People didn't come out. Survivors didn't come out. They didn't want to talk about because they left their family behind. They feel a kind of guilty. And I worked in Israel afterwards for a long time, 15 years. I worked in diamond business. I went to Japan every month from Israel and back. And slowly I had a story from the survivors' descendants. So 1984, my father received Righteous Among the Nations. He wrote down some memo in the paper. He didn't make any memoir by himself, but whatever he remembered, he left in memo, which I could read, I could find. And he wrote a letter to Polish professor. He wrote in Russian because his foreign language, the first foreign language was Russian. So he could leave the story about it. And so my father issued transit visa in Lithuania. He had to leave in the end of August. Actually, the 3rd of September, he left with his family to Berlin, and from Berlin to Prague. In Prague, he established another consulate of Japan and stayed for 6 months. In the meantime, he also issued about 80 transit visa to Jewish refugees. And until the end of the war, he was working in an embassy in Romania. Russians came in, and he and his family were arrested in a camp. And 2 years later, only 2 years later, they were sent back to Japan. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs requested him to resign. He didn't know why, but he said, okay. So he quit the work. Once I asked my father, why did you issue so many visas against the order of Japanese ministry? He said, I felt just pity to those people who had no place to go. That was his word. Nothing like heroic or nothing like a god, just simple. He wanted to save people. So that's the story today. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Buki. I personally know people who were helped by your father. In fact, Nat Lewin is here with us today and would like to share a few words.
My name is Nathan Lewin, and there are testimonies by descendants of survivors of who owe their lives to Sugihara, Chiune Sugihara. I am one who personally benefited because in this, as this document shows, I was 4 years old at the time when the Sugihara visa was issued to my parents, and there it is. It's right up there. That's Nobuki's father issued that, and that was one of the very first Sugihara visas, even before Dr. Barhaftig's visa and others. And one person also that ought to be mentioned in connection with the Sugihara visas is the Dutch consul and countess Jan Zwartendijk, who also issued and wrote on the document the basis for the issuance also by Chiune Sugihara of transit visas. He wrote that no visa was required to travel to Suriname or Curacao. And on that basis, Chiune Sugihara was able, against the instructions of his ministry, to issue 2,000 visas to Jews who were escaping from Nazi Germany. And that included myself at the age of 4, and my parents, Afraim, my parents of blessed memory, and my mother, who really was the one who initiated the effort to get the travel purportedly to Curacao or Suriname that was affirmed by the absolutely heroic deeds of Chiune Sugihara. So I'm happy today to thank Nobuki, who I met in New York and who is carrying on, I think, the tradition of his father and so many people who were really righteous and saved Jewish lives and are being honored here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nat, for sharing your story with us. It's always a pleasure to see you and your family and to follow the important work that you have done over the years. And we are very grateful to Chiune Sugihara for all that he did to make that possible. We will now receive remarks from His Excellency Michael Herzog, Ambassador of Israel to the United States.
I would like to thank Sephardic Heritage International for organizing this event and for inviting me to speak in the annual commemoration of Holocaust Remembrance Day. This event is a worthy way of memorializing the 6 million Jews who were persecuted by the Nazis and their collaborators, paying tribute to the survivors and highlighting the heroism of those who fought against the Nazis. It is the fulfillment of a sacred obligation. The fact that this is a congressional commemoration sends a very strong message from the heart of American democracy about the value of rejecting all hate and racist discrimination in general and anti-Semitism in particular. We highly appreciate it, and I take this opportunity to thank members of Congress who lend their voice in support of this important initiative. This commemoration bears personal significance for me and my family. My late father, Chaim Herzog, who fought as an officer in the British Army during World War II, was in the 1st Allied Division that entered Nazi Germany and was among the liberators of the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. One of his first cousins perished in the Auschwitz death camp. Years later, when my father became President of the State of Israel, he reflected that his life cycle symbolizes the victory of the Jewish people over the Nazi regime and all that it symbolizes. Indeed, the Jewish state which he headed and which I proudly represent here today in the United States is the strongest testament to that victory, both physically and spiritually. However, we must not rest on our laurels. The memory and the lessons of the Holocaust must always stand in front of us and guide us. When we say never again, we essentially recognize that a similar atrocious phenomenon may reoccur, and we express our determination to prevent it. Today, as anti-Semitism rears its ugly head here in the United States and across the globe, this message is as relevant and urgent as ever. I want to thank everyone who put this important event together and contributed to our virtual gathering today, especially SHIN-DC, the members of Congress here with us, Holocaust survivor David Baruch, and the rest of the honored speakers who represent our allies in the diplomatic corps, the Muslim world, and the righteous among the nations. Thank you all. Be blessed.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Please also accept our condolences on the recent loss of your late mother, Alea Shalom, Mina Shamayim Temnuhamu, and may her memory be for a blessing. Within the context of the modern Middle East, the Crossroad of Civilizations Museum, like the heroes that we are honoring today, goes against the tide. As the first permanent Holocaust exhibit in the Arab world. We will now turn to His Excellency Ahmed Obed Al-Mansouri, former member of the Federal National Council, the UAE's parliament, and founder of the Crossroad of Civilizations Museum. Sheikh Al-Mansouri.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and so honored to be here. And today we just finished our own event for Holocaust International Day of Remembrance of the Holocaust, and at the Crossroads Civilization Museum. We're very honored to have Mr. Emil Abraham Fish, a survivor, with us. And for the first time in the UAE, we are celebrating in 3 different places. As you know, that we in the Crossroads Civilization Museum have established the first Holocaust gallery, a permanent one, in the Arab world. The Crossroads Civilization Museum is about all civilizations that have passed in the region, and the place was very well known for multiculturalism, and we're promoting respect, tolerance, and openness, and accepting others. Having said that, these great values can be idealistic only if we do not present the other. So it was very important for us to open a Holocaust gallery, because as we say and as we have always learned, that to stop it and to never have this crime against humanity, which is the biggest crime against humanity, happen against the Jews, and not to happen again, we need to educate people. People have to learn about it. They have to really learn about the heroes also, because the heroes are the real leaders, the leaders who really did the changes, the leaders who took a risk, the leaders who went a couple of miles to save others. And that's why in the museum, half of it, we are talking about the Holocaust, about education, the chronological, how things happened, the narratives. At the same time, on the other half, we have dedicated a section about righteous amongst nations to show the people, still there's a hope in the world. Having the Holocaust gallery in the Arab world is very important, and especially in the MENA region and the Islamic world. One part of it is to correct the narratives. Secondly, it's very important to educate the people and to stop such things happening. Moreover, when we talk about peace, about the reunion happened lately between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, it's a comprehensive peace. It's a peace where 2 nations have started politically, they paved the way for it. But it's very important to look at it in a comprehensive way. The most important thing is people to people. It's not just people only celebrating the good days, but also we have to have feeling for one another. We have to have compassion for one another. And through this Holocaust gallery, we are opening, the dialogue, the debates, and which is very challenging for us, because we are not focusing on teaching about the Holocaust to the Jews or to the Israelis. We are teaching the Holocaust to more than 200 ethnicities who live here, and to the people from different religions, different ideas. So it has been a great experience to explaining to them the Holocaust, and so they can understand it's not only about the Jews. It's a crime against humanity. And we start with our gallery with a verse from the Quran, which is also it's in Hebrew. It says in Arabic, "Man ahyaha faqad ahya an-nas jami'a." Who saves one life saves the whole life. And also it said, if you kill one life, you kill the whole humanity. So how about when people kill 6 million people? How that devastating effects on humanity. Today we had a moment of silence for 1 minute, and they say if we're going to have a moment of minutes for every soul, we'll be having 11 years, of standing as moment of minutes. So. And we were very blessed today. We had people from the ambassador of Germany was here, and he was talking about the things, and he was apologizing for what happened. We had ambassador from Canada, and we had daughter of survivor, and we have a survivor himself. Emil Fish was speaking. It's all symbolic that our region is going in the right direction. Sadly, anti-Semitism, xenophobia, and we have racism is increasing all around the world. But it's good that being here as a place with different nationalities, we can really spearhead, working side by side with our Jewish brothers and Jewish and Israeli brothers to spearhead development in the region, in the Middle East, by making them understand, educate the devastating, the damages of the Holocaust, the bad result of intolerance, how that will lead the region to drainage. So we decided that we need to work together, move together to have a better Middle East, to make Middle East great again, like golden ages, but when the Jews and the Arabs were really working side by side, living together in peace. So it's very important for us to honor the heroes. At the same time, it's very important for us to remember what happened, the victims, and and very important for us to really to increase education. We have children come here, children from different nationalities. They visit the gallery. We have people at all levels. The beauty about the museum is that in the museum, people do not judge. When they come to the museum, they put their political judgmental hat outside. They come there, with their curiosity, and it has been great. And we have managed to make 3 events so far about the Holocaust, especially about the Holocaust. And today was our 3rd one, and I'm very honored to be with you. And hopefully you'll have a chance to visit it. It's a catalyst project. It's small, but the message is much more powerful in the region. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Sheikh Al-Mansouri, for sharing that with us and for showing us a view of the future, moving forward in terms of sharing and applying the message never again. When I was speaking with David Baruch some time back and used the title Righteous Among the Nations, David told me, we just call them family. So we would like to thank all of our family today. Thank you for joining us to work together to share and apply the lessons of never again. And thank you for joining us in the fight against anti-Semitism and racism. To conclude, I'd like to thank Mr. David Baruch, Excellencies, members of Congress, and all of our distinguished guests and speakers, as well as their teams who worked out logistics with us. Much appreciation goes out to the Sugihara and the Sousa Mendes families. Thank you, Ms. Anka Yael Popper from the Embassy of Germany, and to Mr. Armand Chandro from the Embassy of Albania for honoring us with their presence. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Thank you, Stella Hanan Cohen, who is here with us. And thanks to all of the SHIN board. Thanks to all of our co-sponsors whom we mentioned at the beginning of this program. Their links are on the registration page for this event on the SHIN-DC website. Just a concluding thought. When looking into the mirror of history, the world has to ask itself why there are so few heroes, as we heard about today. And this is perhaps why it's important to recognize those who risked their lives to rescue Jews as part of never forgetting the atrocities of the Holocaust. We will now conclude with memorial music from pianist Renan Cohen, counselor in the Jewish community of Turkey.
Thank you so much, Afraim. Dear David Baruch, dear Excellencies, dear members of Congress, dear participants. First of all, I would like to thank you to SHIN-DC, to Afraim, to this hard work to carry on this program for 4 years. It's very important. Thank you so much, Afraim. And I would like to perform Yosima Fatshaw's work tonight with you, Mazurka with you. Yosima was born in 1929 in Ukraine, and her family had to move to Warsaw because of the atrocities, because of the violence that they had in Ukraine. They moved to Warsaw in 1940, and unfortunately, they prisoned to Warsaw Ghetto immediately. So Yosima Fatsho was only 11 years old when she prisoned to Warsaw Ghetto, and she became a star pianist in Warsaw Ghetto. She also composed 18 pieces for solo piano there. She died in Warsaw Ghetto, and her mother killed herself after she died, unfortunately. But this 18 works today has given me by her stepsister and niece. So I would like to perform a mazurka by Yosima Fatsho, composed in Warsaw Ghetto when she was only 11 years old. And she was a hero for sure, that she composed in Warsaw Ghetto in such a bad circumstances.
All right, that concludes our program. Thank you so much, Renan. That was beautiful and very moving. And thank you, everyone. Stay safe, be well, and stay safe. And see you all again soon, God willing.
Thank you.